Hello, I'm Neil Romanek. I am the editorial director of The Flint, and welcome to another Flint Forum. And this time it's young people, that is, people who are just entering the industry and are the future of the industry. When I entered the media industry, you had to cut things on film, and that was one of my first jobs, was actually literally cutting things on film, putting taping film together. And the kids coming into the industry now, hate to use that word kids, but I am very old. People coming into the industry now have grown up with media and grown up with being able to capture and distribute video globally. We have basically all of us now a whole film studio in our pockets. And today we're going to get a chance to talk to some newcomers to the industry and ask them what their journey into the industry has been like, what are some of the challenges they've encountered, what they think of the industry they've entered, and what the outlook for the future is. And maybe we can learn, those of us who have been around for a while and possibly entrenched in our ways, may be able to learn a few things from them. So I'd like to thank my guests. Today we've got Charlotte Stoufring from Visor T, Ellie Ashton, um, and Samantha Lee. Sorry, that's Ellie Ashton from Earth to Action. Apologies, I didn't get your company name there. Um, Moritz Ladwig from Sportcast. There you are, Moritz, and Chloe Ryder Ward. And thanks so much, guys, for joining us. I'd like to just kick off. If you guys could maybe tell us a bit about what you do and how you got started in the industry and maybe kind of what your breakthrough moment was. And I think it'd be a great way to kick off and sort of talk about what it's like kind of entering the industry at this time. Do you want to start us off, Chloe?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I'm Chloe. I am resource scheduling manager at Picture Shop. We are Picture Shop, our post production house. Our branch, particularly, is based out of BBC Sport in Salford. Um, I manage a team responsible for staffing pretty much all sport output for the BBC, across things that are broadcast from this very building to major events that occur all over the world. We've just recently completed the Olympics in Paris, so we had a big team working on that. It's a really interesting role. It's interesting to see, even in sort of the time that I have been here with Picture Shop in BBC Sport, how changes to sports productions are occurring in terms of there was a time in which, in order to facilitate the Paris Olympics going ahead, we would have needed to send, I don't know, 100 plus people, our staff of freelancers, out to Paris in order to make that happen. However, this time around, the gallery was in Paris. Sorry, the studio was in Paris, with sort of the crew that's required for that. But the gallery was based back in Salford. So the people that are controlling what's happening in terms of the output that's going on the TV are all based here. And we're just seeing a lot more, with sort of technological advances, a lot more changes to what is possible and how we can approach things from a more sustainable perspective. Unsurprisingly, BBC have a huge responsibility where sustainability is concerned. Um, but also, I think it's just really interesting to see what things work, what things could be improved on, where is the technology to support these different items, how can we be changing things for which roles are possible to work out there and which are possible to work back here. We've seen some really big changes in Wimbledon this year. Normally people are based down at the site for the edits. They're all happening this year, they all happen from Salford because this is where our suites are, this is where people are. Again, not having to transfer staff and the sort of environmental impact on that. And I also think, as well as sustainability being hugely important, it's potentially less disruptive to people, sort of helping improve that work-life balance rather than people being shipped off for 3-4 weeks at a time. So yeah, we work across a whole variety of different things and different sports. It's really interesting. In terms of my start in the industry, I graduated with a degree in media production. My first role was as a producer at a small video production company based in Manchester. In terms of how that came to be and my experiences and tips with that, I would say, obviously, I think a lot of people that were applying for the role at the time were recent graduates, so um, experience was kind of a tricky thing to kind of navigate there because it was very much an entry level role. Um, that said, kind of gaining experience where possible was hugely important in terms of my awareness of what roles existed outside of the bubble of university.
Mm.
Just getting a bit more life experience under my belt, seeing seeing people, speaking to people. So a lot of the work experience and jobs that I ended up getting straight off the back of that were, oh, yeah, you were here on that. Do you want to come and shadow this, or can we hire you for a couple of days on this production? Which just kind of set me up with real world experience by the time it came to applying for roles out of university. So I would just say that now I will caveat this with I think there's a limit and there's a balance. I don't think it should be expected that new people are dedicating weeks, months of sort of unpaid time. I think there needs to be a better balance, arguably, in terms of how people are getting their first steps into the industry. That said, going into productions for short periods of time or just kind of getting to know people, speak to everyone, a lot of people will be more than happy to give up their time and advice to people who are interested in engaging with them. Um,
Mm.
so yeah, that's sort of where I started. I've had a few roles since then, but in terms of going from being a very recent graduate to getting my first role, that those first few days and experiences that I had during my sort of university career were hugely important.
Thank you. That's really interesting that we're because I hadn't really this wasn't necessarily intentional, but we've got a really wide variety of locations represented here. So we've got what do we have? Canada, Germany, Norway, Wales, and England. And to sort of see how that story plays out, I think in each location and why, I think is going to be really interesting in this conversation. Which actually, so Charlotte, can you tell me you're from Norway? You're
Hey,
calling us from Bergen.
yes, I
What was
am.
your entry to the industry like?
So I did my bachelor's degree in Bergen here in Norway. And then one of our courses was that we had to find an internship. And I knew that I wanted to get into the media industry. So we're actually located now I'm sitting at Media City Bergen. So I just went here and applied for an internship at Wizard T. So I worked here as an intern for half a year and back in 2021. Then I went off to Australia. And yeah, similar to you, Chloe, I tried to get some like real life experience other than just university experience. So I actually did work with ITV in Australia on Love Island. So I did like some production work there. And that led me into I was the social media manager for Love Island Norway, actually earlier this year. Finished my degree, my master's degree in Australia, and then yeah, went back to Norway and I posted it on LinkedIn, and then Visorti reached out to me. So they wanted me back, and of course I wanted to come back because this is such an innovative and yeah, cool company to work in, and our growth is really yeah, it's very inspiring, and it's been a growth journey for me as an individual. Just these past yeah 6 months that I've been working here now. Um, but yeah, it's very, I would say one of the causes that I really root for is and try to inspire other young people to do as well is to get involved with the industry before you finish your studies. That did really help
Mm.
me, and I wish I did more of that. Just reach out to people on LinkedIn and yeah, stuff like that is really important. So I would say that that's one of my like heart causes that I really root for. So, and that did
Mm.
also lead me to now kind of, yeah, get this job. So, yeah, it's important to brand yourself.
Mhm. Now, Ellie, you were sort of I wouldn't say you were. I guess you were steeped in the industry from an early age because your parents work in the industry,
Yes, but
but
it's
not necessarily sustainability. Whereas
no.
where
And it's a
you're a
funny turn of
pioneer,
events,
actually.
really. I never could have predicted any of it. So hi everybody, I'm Ellie. I am joining you from the north of Wales in the UK, and I am a sustainability manager for a Sky production at the moment. We're bringing the world of crime drama to rural North Wales. It's very exciting. And I work with productions to encourage sustainable behavior and practice with every department, trying to engage the crew in that story and making it something that they're involved in too. Nothing dictatorial, but rather getting people excited about the challenge that faces the industry. And for me, this was not an industry that I ever had any intention of working in, which I think is often what some people think is the opposite of probably how I ended up being here. But it's true. I was at university studying religious studies and specializing in contemporary witchcraft, possibly the least vocational thing I ever possibly could have done. And I was coming up to my last summer holidays, and my mum, who had been a stay-at-home mum for 15 years, had kind of bizarrely landed herself as an environmental assistant on a Netflix production back in 2021. And honestly, at the time, I almost resented her getting this incredible opportunity because for me, it meant suddenly never seeing my mum again. I knew that she had all of these crazy working hours, a ridiculous task ahead of her. And I thought, this industry is madness. Who would ever want to work in it? Until she turned to me and she said, how do you fancy being an extra for 6 weeks through the summer holidays? And I thought, free food, dancing in a fun costume, what could possibly go wrong? Well, what went wrong was that actually I sat in that marquee and I watched the work that she was doing, the way that she spoke to the crew with such purpose and ambition to turn our industry into something that could actually benefit the world, as opposed to actually be a force that was quite destructive across Wales. And I thought that's exactly what I would love to do. And like Charlotte was saying, it was a real heart cause for me, the idea of being able to go to work each day and feel like I'd made a tiny difference. And really, if 8 billion of us did that every day, we'd be living on a different planet. So I started 3 weeks of work experience on that production. I went back, finished my degree, finished writing about witches, so much fun. And then I knew I had to return to this world that I'd found myself in. So somehow taught my way into being the sustainability manager for a Hulu production. That was the ultimate trial by fire. And since then, I've worked with productions to improve sustainable practice. But the important thing for me is that I recognize there's a healthy degree of nepotism in my story, and our industry is plagued with that. So I wanted to be able to use this opportunity that I've had as a way to also create opportunities for other people. So bringing passionate, talented young people into the world of sustainable production is really important for me. I set up my company Earth to Action to be a delivery provider for training to create other sustainability managers and coordinators, and also to just be able to work with productions to bring sustainability into the heart of what they're doing. Kind of trying to change things a little bit, shake up the status quo, but by being on the ground, mud on the boots, showing people what's possible. So that's kind of how I got here.
Amazing. I don't know, witchcraft degree, sustainability. That would be a hard choice for me. Samantha, you got the Rising Star Award, the Corporate Star Awards at IBC. Moritz was a nominee for the Rising Star Award. Can you tell us, tell us what your journey was before that happened, and a bit about Green Spark Group?
For sure. So thank you so much. As you said, I'm Samantha, or you can call me Sam. I am based in Toronto, Canada, which is the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit and home to many, many diverse Indigenous and First Nations people. It's so important to acknowledge, especially in a country like Canada, where there is a colonial history, but like much of the world, to acknowledge the original caretakers and territory and rights holders, of this land. So just a little bit about me and Green Spark Group. I'm a sustainability consultant. We work with productions of all sizes. So right now I'm currently wrapping data for a couple of pretty huge TV series for some major US studios. But I'm also working with 2 other TV series. We work with feature films. And one of the areas that actually most excites me right now as well is I've been working with an advertising agency. I'm helping implement sustainability practices and processes on their teeny tiny, like 1-day photo shoots up to their multi-day video shoots that they're doing. So it's an exciting world, and if I were to sort of summarize in one sentence, which is challenging, and I'm glad we have this panel to keep discussing it. I'd say that where I get the most joy from my work right now is helping implement systems and cross that sort of corporate production gap or divide that there is. We have these excellent corporate sustainability goals and strategies. Implementing it on the ground on production can be quite a challenge. I know, Ellie, you're nodding along because that's a lot of what you do too, it seems. And that's really exciting and a really, I think, important space to be in for the industry right now. So my background is actually a bit closer to Ellie's as well. I did not come into the industry knowing or wanting even to be here. I graduated from an excellent undergraduate program at a school called Quest University out in Western Canada. And I spent all of my time researching sustainability, but also had great experiences working in like politics. And I took a Latin American film studies course and a spherical trigonometry course. So I believe that like breadth and diversity of experiences is so important. And I loved that. I took a break from school after graduating. I went and taught English in Japan for a year, which was an incredible experience. And actually, that's when the COVID pandemic started too. I was overseas. I was on a tour with some friends, and it sort of struck me in that moment that sustainability really was what I needed to do. I didn't care what industry it was in. I didn't care who it was with. I just needed to be doing something to help, to use Ellie's words, to use like any small way that I could, ideally larger ways, to help transform any industry to be sustainable, because it's what the world needs right now. An exciting opportunity came up on a TV show that was filming here in Toronto, working with Green Spark Group. And after, I'll again use Ellie's words, or no, I think it was Chloe's words, the trial by fire. It was a huge learning curve for me to figure out how this big circus of production works. But that opportunity was invaluable because now, as a sustainability consultant with Green Spark Group, I'm working, as I said, on that gap between corporate goals and implementation on the ground on production. So that's exciting to me. And I feel like every year, every month, my job continues to grow and transform as the industry does as well.
Amazing. Moritz, you're working with sports?
Yes. Hi, I'm Moritz. I'm a green consultant and green production manager for Sportcast, and we're the host broadcaster for the Bundesliga and second Bundesliga in Germany. So my job is completely related and referring always to football production, which is great because I'm a very huge football fan, as well as a broadcast enthusiast, and I also love sustainability. So it's kind of the perfect match for me. But I did my first steps in the industry actually in front of the camera, and I was thinking about going into the sustainability area because it wasn't a topic anywhere near my work or my private environment. And I think it was in my master degree when the topic came into our lectures, and I decided to jump on it for my master thesis. And then afterwards, it was like, okay, I could do something to become a green consultant. Then I did it without the intention to do anything with it, because it was like, okay, I can do it, and there's a possibility. So why not doing it? I'm interested in this field. And then I kind of got into Sportcast by accident. So this is actually my first job in the industry as a green consultant or in the field of sustainability and media. And yeah, I fell in love with the possibilities. I do see a lot of potentials around it. And there's so much to do, especially because football production is going on, or sports production is going on all around the world, with the NFL expanding into all different countries across the world. We got basketball, we got so many different sports tournaments, and they all produce kind of the same way as we do, with some differences. And yeah, and the thing that I think is most important is stay curious, because most of the young people don't know which positions are there to kind of get into the industry, get a start, and then kind of develop in the industry. Because there's so many positions. I started kind of in sports journalism and then ended up in front of the camera, and then somehow ended up behind the camera just doing sustainability. But it was kind of a development, and I needed to know that there is a chance to grow into that. So that's kind of, you need to know someone in the industry, and I think it's similar to you, Ellie. As you said, you just need to know that there's something going on, and then you can try to get into it. But you need to ask some questions, you need to get to know someone, and just be kind to other people working in the media industry, and that will help you a lot.
It's great, and that's something in all those stories that you've just told, that there are. It seems there's those elements of the unexpected. There's never that kind of linear step from I'm going to go be a director and this is what I'm going to do and my life is going to be, this sort of linear fantasy I think that a lot of people have in the industry. And it seems like it's about keeping your eyes open and that kind of serendipity and being able to do sort of the appropriate aikido for whatever comes at you, and at any particular moment. So what are some of the things that have really surprised you or kind of maybe even shocked you coming into the industry? And I think sustainability, there may be a few things that have shocked you, but something that you hadn't expected. Anybody?
I'd be glad to jump in there. I think one thing that's really taken me aback is the fact that perhaps it's the Welsh industry, but I would certainly say that most people's approach to resource management is maybe 10 years behind what you would do in your home. And so at home, you would have streamlined recycling. You go to work, everything is thrown into a skip. And that's a mindset and a habit and requires a behavior change as much as anything else. So a production can provide the infrastructure, the companies to set up recycling, but what really matters is helping people to actually care about what it is that we're working with and what they do with it when we're done. So I think one of the things that I found really shocking was that idea that somebody who is a creative by nature, a storyteller, because we all are, if we're working in this industry, we're all telling some story. But the story at hand here in terms of production is actually a horror story because we take these incredible resources and then we throw them away. And actually, I think what we can do as an industry is rewrite that. So with our resources, whether that is timber or costumes, incredible props, the things that we use every day, if we change that ending so it can actually benefit the community, it can go out to be useful for schools and colleges. It's a completely different world and it changes people's relationships to the materials that we're using. It changes their relationship to the community around us because there's suddenly inherent value. So it's that mindset of rubbish is actually a resource. And my favorite anecdote from this whole incredible story is the ridiculous thing as well about my job is that I will sometimes have a production say to me, "Hey, Ellie, we have 80 tons of high-grade Belgian sand, and you personally have 24 hours to get rid of it." I mean, it literally sounds like a TV show in and of itself, like some mad challenge. So I remember I went back to my office that particular day and I sat down and I thought, who uses sand? Am I going to try and find a children's playground, perhaps an animal shelter? And that was it. I reached out to the Wales Ape and Monkey Sanctuary and they were over the moon. They really were able to benefit from it and use it for the grounds in which the monkeys and apes that they've rescued play. And I called in a few favors with the rigging company and managed to get that over there. Now, otherwise, that sand literally would have been discarded, and instead we rewrote that story, and that rubbish became a resource. And I think changing that mindset was a shock to begin with, because I couldn't believe anyone would ever mistreat a resource like that. But when you engage the whole production in that mindset, you see a completely different thing happen. It's so exciting.
That's right. That is that that the media industry kind of likes to pat itself on the back for being sort of on the cutting edge and modern and we're hip and we're forward thinking. But in fact, there are things that are very, very conservative or traditional, or this is the way we've always done it. There's no reason I should change it. Leave me alone and go back into your cubicle or whatever. Things are very set, a very set way of doing things, and that I think maybe contrary to a lot of other industries, is maybe something that is holding the media industry back. What about Moritz? Have you found anything in sports?
It's kind of what you said already. It's a very conservative field, and they always do things like they did it for the past 10 years or 15 years or even further. And that's often a challenge because there are a lot of innovations around football, for example, like new camera angles, new cameras at all, stuff like mic up the referee, stuff like that. But basically, the whole production is still the same as it was 10, 15 years before. And it's something that Ellie said, it's a mindset change that needs to be implied. So the people need to understand that it's very, very urgent to kind of jump on the train to get to the stadium and to use at least carpooling options to travel by car, because sometimes you need to get on site by time. So it's very difficult to take the train, but then just organize yourself in carpooling situations and stuff. And there are so many things that are bound to a mindset that is living in 2015, 2010. And we need to break them, and we need to kind of reinvent the way we produce. And this has kind of been done by remote production, for example, which is a very interesting way to kind of get rid of a lot of the vehicles we usually transport to the venue. But yeah, it's still a lot of work to convince all people related to the production because it's so conservative.
Yeah, and Chloe, can you maybe talk a bit more about that, kind of from that broadcast point of view? And also, the UK is really, in terms of sustainable practice, the UK broadcasters are actually probably leading-ish in the world, which is not, it's a pretty slow race, but they're really leading. And Manchester especially, I think, is as a city does quite a good job.
Yeah.
But yeah, but what are you seeing in terms of things like, oh man, what are you guys thinking?
Honestly, to echo what Ellie and Moritz have said, I think my experience here, certainly kind of being based out of Salford, is kind of there's a way things have been done for a period of time, and kind of that encouragement of people getting out of what has always been done to improve things for the better, which I'm sort of we're sort of seeing it before our very eyes at the moment, which is really encouraging that there are those changes that are happening, and it kind of through potentially outside pressures, but sort of however it's happening. There is a sort of strong, right, okay, every single production has to complete sort of sustainability checks, and how can we approach this? What can we do differently here? And we're kind of feeding into that with the productions and how they run things in a sort of sense of how do we get crew to places, like you say about Moritz, with like carpooling and using the train more often. We did have to send some stuff out to Paris for the Olympics, but we didn't just put everyone on a plane. It was like, right, okay, what are other methods of getting people here? As you mentioned, right, train travel. Well, the Eurostar exists, so yes, we might have to think a little bit more strategically about the days that people arrive and how we approach with production in terms of they're looking at when people can go. So we just have to staff around that. And actually, I think everyone loves a train anyway. So I think oftentimes it's people's preference, but it is those changes that we're seeing for the better. I think Manchester is a great example of kind of sustainability. I do think it's hugely important here. I think there's a hell of a long way to go. But even just kind of getting around the city, there are kind of free electric buses. We have a pretty solid tram system. The encouragement for people to look at other methods of getting to Media City here. Interesting that, Charlotte, you're based in Media City Bergen, we're Media City Salford, slightly less glamorous. But yeah, the infrastructure is being improved upon and increased all the time, specifically, I would say, on the transport front. The Mayor of Manchester, Andy Burnham's kind of very pro, right, transport links, transport being more accessible to people, which I just think is hugely important, because it is a very easy place to get around, and it's kind of expanding the boundaries of central Manchester. It's the sort of the infrastructure is going beyond the immediate city borders, which I think is hugely important in terms of giving everyone greater opportunities. Just because you shouldn't not be able to have opportunities because you don't have a car to get to a certain location, right? Okay, so let's make it easier for people to get to places. So I think that is really encouraging. I think there's loads more that can be done in terms of the impacts on the city and things like that. I don't think we're by any means there yet in terms of waste, and there is still a hell of a, well, Manchester is always full of traffic, so it's not perfect. But yeah, I'm seeing less. Well, we're just doing it this way because it has been in like the last couple of years too. It was very definitely sort of, I graduated in 2014, and the conversations just weren't occurring then to the rate they are now. So even if just increasing people's everyday awareness of, right, okay, well, is this the best method, best approach to this particular problem or task, or let's not just follow the blueprint that we have for the last 5 years. Let's look at other options here. Is really encouraging.
That's interesting. The Charlotte, you're in Bergen, which is Norway, and we've just published our Flint Focus, the Nordics special, which Visitor supported. And we looked at the Nordics generally and how advanced certain things are in the Nordics, at least from the point of view of other countries. So there are some things that you guys seem like you kind of take for granted that the rest of us are sort of struggling with, but that kind of beneath the surface, that may not be as rosy as that. So what are some of the issues that you actually are facing there, or some of the things that you are, particularly around sustainability or around work, that people might be surprised to learn?
Yeah, I'm just gonna say, like, it's very interesting to hear from your guys' side, because I guess Visitor, we are a company that delivers graphic solutions to big broadcasters. So yes, like, we're based in Norway right now, but we are a very global company. So I guess, yeah, I mean, I'm the corporate communications coordinator. So in my job description, I actually have to like deal with a lot of the sustainability stuff as well. Um, and yeah, we're really trying to limit the business travels, even though that is a big issue for us since we're so global, we always have to travel. But yeah, as you guys said, we're trying to travel more by train. And then of course we're trying to transition from hardware to the cloud. Would be nice to do that 100% in a few years. But yeah, there's definitely like a big problem in our industry is I feel like we have a lack of pace towards sustainability. So we definitely have to do more.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Um, Sam, Canada, I was speaking yesterday actually with the head of sustainability at the CBC, and she was talking about this amazing kind of transformation. It feels like that Canada in just a few short years has really scrambled to kind of get up to speed with sustainability. And I guess people like you are kind of part of that big push. So what has it been like kind of jumping aboard that with what seems like a moving train, or a train that's just getting started?
Yes, thanks for the question. Uh, GreenSpark Group has worked, we've been really grateful and honored to work with so many transformative companies across Canada, like the CBC, like Telefilm Canada, contributing to their research, their reports, and their strategy development. So that has been a really incredible opportunity because just like going back to your earlier question about what has surprised me, I was so
Hmm.
happy to learn about all of the great people who are already working on this by the time that I joined the industry. So Canada is a bit of a unique space, and I'm sure not going to capture all of this in this brief summary, but we have both a healthy domestic media industry with our broadcasting, as well as with a good network of different funding bodies for independent producers or Canadian-based domestic producers. I hear that there are healthy co-production treaties with other countries. Canada, as you may or may not know, is a very like multinational and diverse country. So those co-productions are so important for people being able to express their identities and their stories in the languages and with the backgrounds and histories that they have. But we also do a lot of service production for the US specifically. So I mentioned in my introduction how I work with productions that are four major US studios that come up here for various different reasons to come shoot in Canada, work with Canadian production companies. And that space is so interesting because the budgets for a service production from a US company versus a domestic production can be quite different. It's yeah, so and by different I mean a lot of money versus very, very little money. So there was a seminal report that came out after the Screen New Deal, which was published by Albert, which maybe people here don't know that. Definitely look into that, BAFTA Albert's Screen New Deal report. The US-based Sustainable Production Alliance, which are now called the Sustainable Entertainment Alliance, they released a report soon after that, which broke down data from their productions, the carbon footprint data specifically, looking at the feature film side, breaking it down by budgets, but then also looking at TV series, breaking it down by type. And what Canadian productions did when they looked at that, or the Canadian industry when we looked at that report, it was really valuable because some of the findings were that travel and transportation contributed to at least half or more of the carbon footprint on average. But they looked at the smallest budget category that was captured there, and they said, well, our productions, like we have a whole range of domestic productions that are all supposed to fit within that category, and we want to know what that looks like in more detail. So we had the opportunity with Green Smart Group to complete a report for Telefilm Canada that looked at domestic production and the carbon footprints associated with what we do. And that was a really exciting space to be in. That report just came out last year. I do encourage people to look into it if you're a bit of a data nerd like I am. But we found similar results, which is that travel and transportation is, of course, a major contributor for many production types. But the smaller you get, the smaller the budget is, the more that materials impact can also tick up, because with their budgets, productions are focused on putting the best thing or the thing that they want to see on camera. They want to put it in front of the camera. And what that can mean is an increased material spend when you get more money, or an increased travel and transportation spend when you get more money. So I think the biggest challenge that faces not just the Canadian industry, of course I work here, so we're focused on it here, but possibly the industry around the world too. And I might even take a step back and say the world, with our patterns of production for materials across other industries, is to decouple spending, to decouple that financial direction from the high emissions or emissions intensive activities that are contributing to climate change. So I'm encouraged by the fact that that's something that we're seeing here in Canada. That's something that they're seeing in other jurisdictions in this industry, but it's also something that tracks across the world in other industries. Is we need to be creative about the ways that we decouple spending from emissions generation.
And Canada is, and the geography is going to really impact how you do things. I mean, Canada is lots of big spaces, and you can't just like, we'll just jump on a tram and go to Ottawa, you know.
We don't have the trains that folks do in other parts of the world.
Or even if you had trains, it's like, that's a long trip. Being the second largest country in the world, you know. So you're going to be you're going to be burning carbon in a different way than, say, if you're shooting in, if you're using London as a base, or Salford, or so that's really interesting. So are you hopeful for the future? I mean, you guys are sort of starting out, and I mean, I guess you have to be hopeful, but it's, frankly, you're not being handed the same type of future that people a generation before you were handed. Actually, you are being handed the same future. It's just farther along in the movie than the one, and they didn't do the job that they were supposed to do. And you're getting, but anyway, I mean, what is do you think about that, or what are your feelings about that? Because that climate change and all the resulting complications that cause that, and that will bring about, are creating a different world of work, different economics, a different physical environment. Does that fit into your plans or thinking?
I might jump in first quickly, just to say, yes, of course, I fluctuate between hope and anxiety every single day, multiple times a day. Some days it's more about anxiety, some days it's more about hope. And I think that's a very real problem that's not just in this industry, but everybody we're all dealing with. But something that I keep in the back of my mind and bring forward when we talk about this is that hope is also a very intentional action or a choice to make. And so that's a choice that I am choosing to make as much as I can and every single day to help also combat that anxiety. So I think it's imperative that we are hopeful, but that we're also choosing hope and choosing actions to help create the world that we want to live in.
I think
Anybody else
as well
want to chime in on that?
sort of to echo what Samantha said about being hopeful, you're right. There are certain aspects of the kind of the industry and the state of things at the moment, not just from a sustainability perspective, but like a stability perspective as well. I think it's a huge period of change, and that's not sometimes change can be great, but sometimes it can also lead to, like I say, a lot of periods of instability and kind of what is the next step for major broadcasters? What are things going to look like? What jobs are going to be available? Which is, gosh, I imagine a lot of people are concerned about that on the daily. However, that element of hope that you spoke of, Samantha, the keys are being handed to this next generation, who I think are incredibly aware of sustainability impact, social impact, equity, in a way that I am so heartened by sort of just things that I'm seeing as I've got sort of more junior team members on my team that I look after, and the things that are concerning them. Yes, they are concerning them, which you don't want someone, you kind of got to get that balance right between, okay, let's be proactive rather than just doom spiral about the state of things, but they are considering these things. And I think so long as people are trying to sort of better things and have an awareness of their part in the world and how they can impact the industry, that's half of the battle. Knowing your impact and on yourself, on your wider team, on things beyond that, is going to be significant.
I'd love to jump in there. I think that hope is an energizer, and energy is what we need, particularly on the ground with productions, also as an industry as a whole, also as a planet. I think that we have such a task on our hands. And to speak candidly, I think it's terrifying, but fear can lead to apathy, and that can paralyze us. And we can't afford to be paralyzed by this. We have to keep going. So my work is all about bringing hope and energy, joy, optimism to an environment that could be kind of short on all of those things day to day. And you do that through showing people their capacity to create something positive and to be the change that they want to see. I think when you hand people very actionable steps each day, it can completely change their relationship to work and also to fighting the climate emergency. So it's dealing with the small things as emblematic of what we need to be doing for the huge challenge ahead of us too. And I would echo what everybody has been saying about the importance of social justice. And I think that element can often be lost when I speak with sustainability consultants who are focusing entirely on energy reduction strategies and on the technology that will be intrinsic in leading the way in terms of reducing our impact. But how do we bring people along with us? And the way that we do that is by keeping people hopeful, energetic, and engaged. And few things will do that, like when showing them the social element. I think when you tie it to people and the impact we can have on people and our communities around us, that's when I start to see the real change, because people see that they can change each other's lives in a very immediate way, whether it's donating resources, whether it's engaging people in that conversation. That's very exciting when you start to see sustainability as people and planet, and having respect for the people on it, and recognizing that we are all facing this as the human race, as opposed to thinking in silos. Our industry is so often reduced to siloed thinking where it's all of us on different pages. I think sustainability is a very unique department, very unique role, and very unique challenge because it ties together all of us, and that's really exciting.
I'm also reminded, like, say, for example, in Norway or the Nordic countries, it seems like there's a lot of care with, how much Christmas and holiday leave do you get over there? Months, 3 months of Christmas vacation. But I
We
know
do
that
get a lot.
there's a lot of like sort of family care and a lot of that embedded in the culture that seems to also go along with sustainability. Yeah. Um, Mo, do you have anything to add to that?
I just I just thought that I wanted to tell you that that's a thing I learned recently or during the past few months. As Ellie said, like you need to engage the people and you need to get them behind you because first they're not gonna think about sustainability at all because they're just doing their job, especially if it's you talking to freelancers. They're just getting paid to hold the camera and just like do what they are acquired to do, but they don't think of sustainable choices or what could they bring to the table that would help the whole case. And it's very important to understand their needs and to understand what do they care about when they travel to work. So you can kind of steer into a more convenient solution that will benefit sustainability, but will also keep up their values or their needs. So they don't feel like left behind and they just get a new rule set and they just have to behave in a sustainable way, although it's completely against what they want to do or need to do, because then they won't change their private habits, which is also very important because we focus on the media production, but if we change their habits or their behavior in general, it will have a way bigger impact in the end because they will choose public transportation in their private life, for example, over car or even plane. And that will help because they will engage others and so on and so on. It's like a domino effect. And so to get the people behind and to understand what they want is crucial for success.
And it is really that. I mean, it's technology is not gonna, if we get all the electric cars in the world, which would be a terrible idea, but everybody gets an electric car and everybody goes vegan, would be amazing. But that tech and those sort of fixes aren't actually going to address the deeper problem of like behavior change and that we actually have to do things and organize society in a different way. So I guess maybe that gets back to kind of that view of what you've seen, as you come into the businesses that you've been working with, and kind of the entrenched way of doing things. I mean, what is your take on that, or maybe your view on being able to reinvent work in a completely different way? I mean, you come in and
Just want
you've
to add
sort of
something,
seen,
Neil, because
yeah,
because
yeah,
you said you made a point. I think I can add something because for us, for example, we have very standardized production, so it's always the same kind of, and we can reduce the technical requirements, we can reduce the power consumption, we can reduce the emissions emitted by our generators and stuff, but there is a limit. We know there's a limit because we still need to do the production. So if we can reduce our emissions by 50, 60, 70%, for example, it is nice that we have that, but it won't bring us anywhere because then the bigger change comes in, or the bigger impact comes on the table, and we need to figure out how to involve all the people and then kind of change them. So that's something I just wanted to add because it just came to my mind.
yeah, no, but that's exactly it. It's that you can kind of crunch with efficiency or changing workflows or working from home or whatever. You can sort of crunch these things down, but you can only squish them to a certain point, and then it's like, no, we just can't do that. We have to do some completely weird new thing we haven't even thought of. And does that come up, like, say, Sam, and your productions you're working with? Is that, I mean, on the production level, I guess you are again stuck with like, well, we have to make this movie, but are there issues where you're like, you could just do not do this at all, just do something completely different?
That's a great question and a great comment from Moritz as well. The something that I often come up, well, there are so many things that we have to work on, but one just related to this is what I mentioned earlier about all of the focus is what's going on screen, and that's very powerful. Like that's this industry. But sometimes when creative decision makers aren't educated themselves about the impacts of what their creative decisions are, then that can lead to a bit of an impossible situation on the ground, because I can ask the technicians as much as possible, hey, let's plug in and use grid power. Let's try to use battery technology instead of generators. But if the lighting design or the location that's been decided upon, and there's of course other factors too, it's not just creative decision making, but we're kind of stuck at that point. And they have to implement, and they can do the best that they can, but the best that they can is limited, partly because they have to meet the creative requirements and also partly by the technology that's available. So I see that both on the technology and the fuel and emissions reduction side of the challenge, as well as the materials and waste side of things. I would love if there was a mandate across the industry, for example, that, you know, there can be no sculpting foam, there can be no styrofoam used. So, and ideally the education piece of that would be, if early on in the creative process, it gets flagged that, you know, this thing that you'd like to see would, with what we have right now, require styrofoam. So we need to build in front end time. We need to engage those folks on the ground, the craftspeople on the ground, to find alternatives and implement them, so that we're not left in this crunch moment where we're sculpting a whole scene out of foam and it's very quick and people are working long hours just to get it done in time for the camera. So I think that implements, or that integrates, perspectives of sustainability, of material wastage, as well as human health and human well-being, because those long hours and being exposed to that type of material is dangerous. So I think there's a lot of room for education as well above the line, as well as below the line.
And tech does, even though we say, you know, tech won't fix it, but certain tech does allow you to change physically what you're doing things. So like cloud, for example, with Visualty is pushing a lot of stuff in the cloud and working with companies to do more production in the cloud. That's enabling, or maybe you can talk a bit about that, Charlotte, that enabling companies to like just not move people and just not move stuff.
Yeah, so I mean, one of our biggest things that we do is obviously live production, and we can teleport people. So you can be in UK and then you can be in Norway at the same time doing the same production. So that is pretty cool. So you don't have to like travel by plane to actually get there to film with all the other people you're filming with. You can actually be in another place. So that does cut down a lot on the emissions. So, but yeah, it's definitely a lot of things that we can do. And we're always trying to innovate and have more ways to do stuff like that. So yeah, teleportation is definitely a cool kind of new thing that we're doing.
Amazing. We are going to wind up here in a little bit. We have a couple guests who might want to ask questions. If you do have questions, please put them in the chat. And we can ask them of our guests. I guess I would also, you know, you mentioned the equity as being an essential thing, and that, you know, people are the most important parts. How have you seen people being treated in the industry, and what is your take on that? And you're probably not going to say, "Boy, my boss is really horrible to me all the time," but you know, what is your view of how people are being treated? There's there's an awful lot of stories about people who become very rich and powerful in the media industry, and it seems like almost like the reason they did it was so that they could treat people however they wanted, you know. And so, yeah, I'm just wondering, what's the vibe and what has your experience been?
I think this is a great example of where young people are emboldened and empowered and quite unafraid in naming behavior that we don't want to see in the workplace anymore. And I think this applies to the task of tackling the climate emergency head on too. In the last 20 years, we've seen the Me Too movement, we've seen Fridays for Future, we've seen Black Lives Matter. And I think our generation is able to name what we are no longer comfortable living with. And that applies to our industry too. And year on year, I have seen our industry change for the better. I have seen intimacy coordinators on set. I've seen well-being advisors on set. I've seen sustainability managers go from being quirky and new and different to being practically mandatory. And that is so exciting. I can obviously only speak from my experience in the UK, but to think that we are increasingly able to advocate for ourselves as we move into positions of authority within the industry, that's so exciting. And I think that that also comes down to our relationship with social media and how we are interconnected. The fact that we're even able to have this conversation right now and to be able to share our perspectives globally, that's exciting and that is creating change. So I think that the behavior of the previous century, I hope there is no place for in the future, and that's what will be truly sustainable.
Anybody else want to add anything? What have you seen?
I agree that there's been definitely positive changes in the right direction. I've been in the industry about 10 years now. And yeah, I have some sort of early career horror stories and things that I've seen and things that I'm confident that I feel more empowered to not accept now, and seeing less of the kind of things that aren't acceptable any longer. Like you said, Ellie, people being emboldened to say no. I'm not gonna be happy witnessing this kind of treatment of people or this attitude towards something. But kind of in our workplace as well, it's the ripple is throughout. So yes, treatment of others, actions, attitudes, but we have systems in place where people can speak to people about their mental health. I'm mental health first aid trained. There are other infrastructures that have been set up to support people, and it's not just okay, well, they're physically injured, so they need some time off work. It's a whole sort of holistic approach to how people live their lives now and support that people might need, and rather than just bringing in like occupational health because again someone has an injury, it's right, mental health, occupational health. How can we work with people, which I think can only have a positive impact on just about everything we touch, from enjoyment in the workplace, safety in the workplace, security in the workplace. I guess that's probably feeding into sustainability as well. If people are having conversations on a much more overarching level about things that are important or upsetting or concerning to people, it's going to be a huge benefit. And I think the shift that has been occurred even in just the last 10 years is really encouraging for how things will be in another 10 years' time.
Charlotte, what do you, because you also worked, you were saying, in Australia and in Norway, and do you see any differences in those countries?
Yeah, I was gonna jump in to mention that I have actually seen that just from 2021 and then with my gap up until now, I can see a huge difference, especially where companies now, especially at Media City, where I'm at, are focusing a lot more on young talent, which is really good. And yeah, at Visit we're now trying to get like internship guidelines in place. So we have now like a committee that focuses only on young talent and bringing in young talent. So that is really cool. And I can see that other companies here are doing the same. We have huge events for students where we can network with them, and yeah, there's just lots and lots more of like student events that we can go to actually get in contact with the industry, which is really cool. And that does also help kind of bridge the gap that we're seeing now in the industry with the knowledge. So yeah, that's really good. And the one thing that I really noticed now that I'm back.
That's something we didn't really even get into, was that idea of knowledge and knowledge sharing, and the sort of people aging out of the industry, or not even aging out, just kind of retiring, or often just moving on because there's not as much work as there was. That there is a lot of maybe it's 20th century knowledge, but it's still a lot of useful knowledge there, and kind of how that's getting transmitted to younger generation, I think is especially with so many people working in an atomized, at home digital way, may not be getting transmitted in the way that it could be. Sam, did you have anything you want to add to that? People?
Other than like collaboration is so important, and it almost just feels like a buzzword, but it's so true. And that's the way that I approach my work every day, and that I would, if folks are looking to get into this space, specifically in sustainability and media, approaching it with a collaborative mindset and open curiosity about others' experiences is really essential. Yes.
Great. And Moritz,
I
sport. I
think
mean, sports doesn't always have a great reputation for how it treats people.
definitely not, yeah. But I think what I want to add is I think young people need a few things when starting, especially in the industry. That is honesty, because we need honest feedback. We need transparency. We need to know why a decision is made. We need also a lot of support, and we need kind of the chance to grow into responsibility. So young people need to be put into places where they have at least a small amount of responsibility, so they can kind of get into decision making, get their impact involved, and that is kind of the most important thing that I learned. That if you have a job in the industry where you just one out of 1,000 people, and you don't matter, you'll get the feeling that why am I here? What am I doing? And if you have at least a little responsibility, then you will kind of keep up the motivation and kind of have the bigger impact by time, because you can grow into something and you can learn. And as you all said, like, be curious and ask questions, and get experiences from others. And that's kind of the thing that I think all the companies need to learn, that young people need to be treated like that, at least from my experience.
Amazing. Well, that's all the time we have now. I would love to take this conversation further, and it seems like a topic we can kind of keep delving into to check in, later on maybe with you guys. Ellie, Charlotte, Moritz, Chloe, Samantha, thank you so much for joining us. You at home watching, please be sure to subscribe to the Flint newsletter at our website, and we'll see you at the next Flint Forum. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.